You for playing the game Engines of Mischief. This video is designed to help players with the economic theory that will be used in the town hall section of the game to make arguments about laws that must be passed. In particular, we'll be talking about the ideas of Adam Smith and Robert Owen that were quite popular at the time of the game. Don't forget that the game is set in the Industrial Revolution in Manchester, England in 1817 and 1818. So players can use ideas that were popular at this period or the period before this, but not in any subsequent period. Also, don't forget the goals of the game. Your goal as a player is to make the new industrial economy work for you, your class, and the nation as a whole. You can do this in two ways: in town hall by passing laws, and in marketplace by conducting business and making money. In town hall, you will get laws passed by making convincing arguments, and you can use the ideas of contemporary thinkers or contemporary business people or contemporary workers in order to get those laws passed. In different sessions of town hall, different topics will be discussed. This will be up to the game master for your particular game. But also in the different sessions of town hall, certain bills can be moved that the aristocrats will vote upon. So pay attention to what is the topic of the town hall for that day and what bills you are considering. For the video today, we were just going to talk about some general economic theories that can be used in any section of town hall. These are in the core text section of the game book. So this video will be about Adam Smith, whose Wealth of Nations is one of the core texts, and also about Robert Owen's A New View of Society. Adam Smith was most popular for a theory that became known as economic liberalism. And this theory was outlined most specifically in his book, The Wealth of Nations from 1776. Adam Smith's theories were new because he was arguing against the older economic theory of mercantilism that was based on the idea that land was the most important source of wealth, and that trade in agricultural products and other handmade goods were what made the nation wealthy. Smith objected to this theory because he thought that it only really benefited the aristocracy. Aristocrats owned almost all the land in England, and therefore, when the economic theory is based on the idea that land is the most important, it's the aristocracy that benefits the most. Aristocrats also controlled government because they had a sense of paternalism or noblesse oblige, the idea that certain people of high birth and powerful social position knew better than everybody else in the nation, and that they should control the government. Aristocrats also controlled the economy through a great deal of government regulation, particularly of trade, to ensure that there was a favorable balance of trade so that the British people sold more goods than they purchased, and made sure that they got money in that way. Smith, on the other hand, thought that manufacturing and industry was the most important source of wealth, not agricultural. And this is because he thought that it was had the ability to be more productive than any other source of wealth, particularly because the division of labor could be more extensive in manufacturing. And he supported industrial manufacturing because he thought it made the entire nation wealthy, not just the aristocrats. Hence the title of his book, Wealth of Nations. He thought that by focusing on industrial manufacturing, middle-class entrepreneurs or business owners could make a profit, workers would have more jobs, and aristocrats could have more investment opportunities. So the focus of Smith was on manufacturing, not on agriculture. And he believed that what kept most people alive was capital, movable wealth, which is why his theory is the basis of the economic theory of capitalism. Because Smith was focusing on a different source of wealth for a nation, on manufacturing rather than agriculture, he did spend a great deal of time explaining how these manufacturing businesses could make the most profit. And this is important for the players in the game Engines of Mischief to understand because that's one of their goals. Two things are really important for players in our game to understand about Smith's theory about how to make the most profit. The first is the need to set the right price. In manufacturing, there are three key elements to what that price should be. It's the cost of rent, which today we talk about as overhead, which includes rent on, say, factory buildings, the raw materials of the goods that are being made, the maintenance of the equipment. Then there's the wages of the factory workers that are producing the good, and then there's profit. It's always essential to keep in mind profit because without profit, there's no incentive for anybody to open or run a business. So in order to maximize profit, according to Smith, it's essential that rent or wages have to go down. It's very difficult to lower rent because they are fixed costs. So generally what business owners do will work with wages. We'll try to reduce wages to increase their profit. But business owners also have to respond to market forces, to changing supply and demand. So they have to increase or reduce production and price to match this in changing supply and demand. So if supply is rising and more people are producing the same goods that a factory owner is making, it's essential for the factory owner to lower their prices so that they can compete, so that people will buy their product rather than someone else's product. But if supply is falling, if there's a shortage of goods, factory owners should raise prices because people want to buy their goods and they'll be able to get as much money as possible. In our game, it's important for all players to understand these theories of Adam Smith. This includes the working class, the weavers and spinsters, as well as business owners and aristocrats. This picture is of a radical political publication from 1818 that was very popular in Manchester and that would have been known to many of our weavers and spinsters, either by reading it themselves or by having it read in the pub. And as is clear here, this publication does mention Smith and his Wealth of Nations, and it goes into a lot of detail about some of these economic theories. For example, the one we just mentioned, that the price of every commodity is made up of three components: rent, labor, or profit. So it is essential to understand that at this time period, the ideas of Adam Smith were widely known, and that all of our players would have known them. Smith is perhaps most well known for another theory, the theory of economic freedom. And this describes what he thought that the government should do about the economy. And his belief is that there should be perfect liberty, that the government should not interfere with the economy, that everybody should be perfectly free to make as much money as they possibly could. So this included free competition among businesses. The government shouldn't try to help one business over another. Free competition of workers, which means the government shouldn't set any restrictions on wages or conditions of workers. He also thought there should be free movement of goods and of workers from place to place and from job to job. And this would ensure the maximum profit and equality in an industrial society. So Smith advocated economic freedom. This included free trade, no government interference in buying and selling through taxes or tariffs or regulations, free competition, no government interference to help certain businesses with the monopolies or subsidies or loans, and then free labor, no government interference in hiring, firing, wages, and conditions. This economic freedom would allow businesses to do as well as possible. So if business owners could follow their own self-interest, make as much money as possible, and they of course know better than the government how to make as much money as possible, Smith argued that all of society will benefit. Business owners will make a maximum profit. This means that they will be able to expand their business and provide more jobs. They'll also be able to afford higher wages. They'll be able to produce cheaper and better products because free competition means that business owners are always trying to find a way to undersell their competitors, either with lower prices or better quality products. Um, and this will help everybody in society. And this is Smith's famous phrase of an invisible hand. It's as if an invisible hand is directing economics so that everyone benefits without even having to think about everybody benefiting. So the key is business owners have to be allowed to make as much money as possible in whatever way they can. And this wealth will eventually help everybody else. So here's another depiction of the idea of the invisible hand. If people make money, other people will buy things, good businesses will do well, and then everybody makes more and more money and everybody benefits. So this is also known as capitalism or supply side economics. It's the supply of manufactured goods. It is the business owners that should be the focus. And if they make their wealth will trickle down to everybody else in society. So this is sometimes known as the trickle down theory of economics. Of course, there are problems with Smith's theory, and at this time period of our game, there were a number of people who were unhappy with this type of economic thinking. So we'll have to look at some of the objections to Smith's theory and even some of them that Smith himself anticipates. So the first thing that Smith does argue and is aware of is the fact that with perfect freedom, perfect liberty, employers and workers will not always agree with one another. So he says that the two parties do not really have the same interests. And what the difference is that the workers want high wages. They want wages to be as high as possible, but employers want wages to be as low as possible. So there will always be a conflict between employers and workers if there is complete freedom. And what will happen is that both groups, according to Smith, will work together to get what they want. They will combine and try to work together in order to get either high wages or to keep wages low. So Smith does describe how employers combine. They will get together, all of the manufacturers of the same products will get together, and they will do it in secret so that nobody knows, and they will make agreements, for example, that all of them will pay the same wages and none of them will raise wages, even if the workers want higher wages. Or they might all get together and agree that they will sink the wages of labor, they'll keep them lower. And that way the workers can't move from one business to another in order to, make the employers try to raise their wages higher. Smith thinks that people are often unaware that business owners do this, but he says that anybody who doesn't know this is, as he says, as ignorant of the world as of the subject. Of course, it's more common for people to understand that workers combine, and they will combine to demand higher wages. And their arguments will always be that the cost of food has gone up, so they have to have higher wages to match the cost of food so that they don't suffer. And also, they'll always argue that employers are rich enough to pay higher wages. Um, Workers will combine by having strikes or other sort of collective actions. And these worker actions will always be, according to Smith, loud and violent, either because the workers are desperate or as a way to frighten employers to raise their wages. And the employers will always end up calling the police or demanding that there be laws to prevent workers from going on strike. And at this time period in our game, there were the combination laws that made it illegal for workers to combine to try to raise wages or to improve conditions of employment. And there also was the Riot Act, which could be used to stop the workers who did go on strike and who did visibly combine. If the riot act was read, they had to disperse or they could be thrown into jail. Workers usually lose, according to Smith, because when the police are called out, they can't resist the police, but also because they cannot survive without having a wage. So if they're on strike and they're not getting their wage, they can't survive. Again, Smith in this passages talks a little bit more about why workers lose. It's also harder for them to organize that many people to go on strike is much harder than a few bosses in a back room deciding to keep wages low. And again, they can't hold out as long without a wage. Employers can hold out with a strike for much longer because they've got some money in the bank, and it doesn't mean that they're starving. So what happens, according to Smith, is that wages will remain low because the workers really don't have as much power as the employer. Smith was aware of the problem of wages being kept too low. He theorized that wages could possibly be reduced to bare subsistence level, and that they only needed to be high enough to ensure that workers could have families so that there were workers in the future. And Smith does think that low wages hurt society. So this is an argument any of our players in the game, particularly our weavers and spinsters, can make. Smith does think that it is not good that the majority of the population does not do well. So what's good for the majority, according to Smith, is good for everyone. And he thinks that high wages, in fact, are good. It helps the workers. It means that they can work harder. And he does think it's only fair that those people who work to feed and clothe and lodge the majority of the population should have, enough that they are, as Smith says, tolerably well-fed, clothed, and lodged. He also thinks that low wages hurt businesses. Workers work harder if their wages are higher because they're stronger. Smith thinks that workers should have some relaxation. They should even have the ability to have some fun. They should think that life can get better in the future with high wages. And he also thinks that high wages are a sign of progress. And that the dictates of reason and humanity are that wages should be high. But this is not necessarily the case. This does not necessarily happen. Another problem with Smith's theory that Smith himself was aware of is that factory work is different than work of skilled workers in their own homes, and that the work of factory workers is, as he says, confined to a few very simple operations, frequently one or two, which means workers don't exert their understanding or their invention. And as Smith argues, they become as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become. This means they're incapable of noble sentiments, they're incapable of understanding the interests of the country, and they're also incapable of defending the country in the war through the military. So factory workers become too stupid to contribute to society, which is another problem of basing all of the economics. And Smith also argues that because factory workers are become so stupid and ignorant, they're liable to a lot of problems. They're liable, as he said, to the delusions of enthusiasm and superstition. In other words, people will come to them and tell them that the government is horrible and that their superiors are horrible. So they become disorderly, they don't respect their superiors, and they fall for revolutionary ideas. So in other words, these factory workers in their condition of work, if there's complete freedom in society, may end up becoming a revolutionary force. So the fact that Smith makes it clear that wages tend to remain low because of the imbalance between the power of workers and business owners, indicates that his theory of wealth trickling down to everybody in society for manufacturing may not, in fact, actually work. And there are a few other reasons that it might not work. First is that it's very possible that only a few people will succeed in with complete freedom, the complete freedom that Smith wants. Because if there is free competition, those businesses with an advantage will end up underselling their competitors and put their competitors out of business. And of course, this is their goal, is to make the most profit, is not to have any competitors. So this will lead to businesses closing down, workers losing their jobs. It also may lead to monopolies where, as people are put out of business, there are two or one people in the same industry, which means there's no more competition. So there's no reason to make goods cheaper or better. So monopoly does seem to be a tendency with free competition, because those businesses that start out better or that end up doing better can put out competitors. Also, there's no real guarantee that the profits of business owners will benefit other people. Business owners don't always expand their business when they're making a profit. They may just keep their profit. So that means they may not always hire more workers. They may use the profit for themselves alone, to buy another house, to buy jewelry or artwork. Also, business owners do not necessarily keep their businesses at home in the nation that provides jobs for domestic workers. They might outsource their businesses to lower their costs. So they might decide to move their business to a country with workers that will work for lower wages, or where raw materials are cheaper. So in the end, business owners may not help workers. They may not raise wages or improve conditions, which means workers won't have enough money to buy the goods that are being manufactured. So again, they're using their profits for the self alone. So there could be, with Smith's theory of perfect freedom, there could be a lot of business failures, there could be monopoly, there could be outsourcing, and the rich could just get richer and richer and just help themselves. Smith does talk a little bit about outsourcing. He claims that business people prefer to have their businesses at home, where they understand the culture and the laws. They prefer to employ local workers, but this is only if they can make a similar profit. If they can make a great deal of extra profit by taking their businesses to another country, they probably will do that. So Smith is aware of some of the problems with his economic theory. So in theory, the wealth is supposed to trickle down. If the business owners get rich, they provide more jobs, the workers have more money, they can buy more goods, which helps the business owners stay rich, and then everybody in society benefits. But what actually might happen is the wealth doesn't trickle down, and all it does is it makes the rich richer. So those people who start out with more money continue to get more and more money, and the poor continue to stay poor. So people at the time, and even Smith himself, did understand that there were some problems with his theory of complete economic freedom in an industrial economy. So a lot of people were looking for some solutions to his theory. And one of them was Robert Owen, who wrote A New View of Society in 1817, the year that our game begins. And Robert Owen is sometimes known as the father of modern socialism. In his work, A New View of Society, Owen is talking about his own experiences. He was a business owner. He owned some textile mills in New Lanark. And he claims that he's always been trying to make a profit from his textile mills. But his theory is that if his workers were treated as, quote, living machines and were taken care of as well as he takes care of the machines that are producing the factory products, that he actually will make a higher profit. So his theory is that, and he says that it actually worked, that he increased his profit by treating his workers well, by taking care of them. And he said he made a large pecuniary gain. In other words, he made a profit, but he also was satisfied. He had gratification. He knew he was doing the right thing. So Owen's theory that he applied in his factories in New Lanark was that he wanted to prevent the fact that manufacturing can cause evils for a large number of people. He thinks this is unnecessary, and if the business owners voluntarily ran their business in a better way, a lot of the problems of the new industrialization would be solved. So by treating your workers like machines that you take care of, Owen argued that the bosses will make a profit. In fact, he said they could get 100% return on investment. And this is because the workers will work harder. Their productivity will increase if they're treated well. So treating workers well included giving them good wages, providing good work conditions. Owen also in New Lanark provided good living conditions, housing for his workers that was cheap and healthy. He provided education, entertainment. He taught them good morality, how to be nice to one another. He also even provided some form of social security in the form of an old age pension, and the ability for older people to buy their houses, to have little gardens, and to end their lives in comfort. So basically, Owen is arguing that Smith's theories could work if the workers are well cared for. The wealth could trickle down, all people would do well, but it does require business owners to make sure that they take care of their workers, that they don't just maximize profit at the expense of workers. So here again is Owen saying that businessmen will not lose money if they treat their workers well, that in fact it's in their self-interest to do so, but it also helps society as a whole. It prevents human misery, and it makes everybody happy. So in New Lanark, when wages were high enough to buy good food, where there were safe and healthy working conditions, leisure time, a community with good housing, old age assistance, this meant that workers were efficient, healthy, strong, and happy. Their productivity increased, profit increased, and this was good for individuals and society as a whole. Owen moved on later in his life from thinking that business owners should voluntarily improve their businesses and help society in that way. He started theorizing that perhaps the workers should help themselves by starting their own cooperative productions where they owned and operated factories and communities as well. He did support trade unions also, with strikes, national strikes, and he did start thinking that perhaps the government should get involved to regulate business, to set hours, like having an 8-hour day, and maybe even set wages. So this is when he became known as the father of English socialism, when he moved away from economic freedom to more government involvement in the economy. So when you're in the game, Engines of Mischief, when you're considering making arguments about help for hand weavers and spinsters, including minimum wage, about factory conditions, even about political reform, you can use the ideas of Smith and Owen.